The actual cause of death was severe malnutrition, she said, but in terms of why his organs started shutting down, we never did get an answer. They just kept passing us from specialist to specialist. That must have been a nightmare for you, for both of you. I'm sorry, I said. Without any prompting, she took a red leather wallet out of her purse and opened it to show me a school picture of a very cute little boy. He had Rodney Glass's same dark hair and pale blue eyes. I felt a pang of hurt for the parents. He wanted to be a doctor, like his dad, she said, or at least like his dad was going to be. Rod was in med school when Zach got sick. The nursing thing was supposed to be temporary. It's funny how life turns out. And you said things were difficult between you afterward? I asked. She nodded as she put away the picture. Rod changed. I mean, to be fair, we both changed. But he just got so paranoid and so angry. I think on some level he blamed himself, like he never got to be the doctor who could save his own son, you know? But on the outside, he blamed everyone else. And when you say everyone, I mean everyone, she answered. The doctors, the hospital, the whole messed up healthcare system. We didn't have any insurance at the time, so you can imagine. If you asked him then, he probably would have said it was the system's fault that Zach got sick in the first place. Molly stopped suddenly and turned to me, as if something had just occurred to her. What's he done, anyway? Is Rod in some kind of trouble? She asked. I'd been gauging her carefully the whole time, trying to figure out how much was too much to say here. I didn't want to leave without getting everything I could, so I went ahead and took a calculated risk. Molly, I told you before that Rodney's been in Washington for the last 3 years, but what I didn't say was that he's been working at the Braniff School for most of that time. She looked at me blankly. Apparently, the name didn't mean anything to her. It's where Zoe and Ethan Coyle are enrolled. It's where the kidnapping occurred. Wait, she said, are you saying Rod's a suspect in that kidnapping? Technically, anyone who works at the school is on our list, I said. It was the kind of answer I had to give, but she understood perfectly. Now her whole demeanor changed. Suddenly she seemed twice as shaky and nervous as before. Her hand treaded back up to the crucifix, and her eyebrows knitted together. I just can't believe that. No, I mean, he couldn't possibly. Could he? I don't know, Molly, I said quietly. Could he? It took her a long time to answer. She bowed her head and closed her eyes for several seconds. Her fingers were all over the cross, and I was wondering if she was saying a prayer, and also if she was involved herself. When she looked up again, she was trembling all over. There's something I have to tell you, she said. Maybe something important. Chapter 86. It was a few months after Zachary died, Molly started in. Things had gotten pretty awful between me and Rod, but then one night, out of the blue, he came home and said he wanted us to go for a drive. She was still staring off into the distance, not really focusing on anything, except maybe the memory of that night. We'd obviously opened some kind of Pandora's box. I kept my mouth shut for the time being and just listened to her. Honestly, Detective, the last thing I wanted at that point was to go anywhere with him, but we'd been fighting so much it just seemed easier to say yes. So I got in the car and he started driving. After a while, Rod took out this thermos he used for work. He told me he'd filled it on the way home at this place where I always liked the hot chocolate. It seemed like he was trying really hard to be nice, so I went ahead and drank some. I didn't even think about it until later, but he never had any of the cocoa, just me. It seemed pretty clear where this was headed now. I could feel the dread climbing up my neck, thinking about Molly, but also about Ethan and Zoe. Pretty soon, I started feeling sleepy, she went on. Like, weirdly sleepy. It came on so fast, I didn't even get to wonder what was happening. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in this place, like a basement or a cellar. I don't even know what it was. I remember it smelled like dirt, if that makes any sense. Molly, do you have any idea where this was? I asked. I couldn't hold back my questions anymore. Do you remember where he took you? Anything about the ride there? She shook her head. Believe me, I've wondered, but that whole time is just a foggy dream in my mind. He left a cooler with sandwiches and some water, and I'm sure the food and water had more of whatever was in that hot chocolate. But it was like I didn't even care. I barely remember any of it. Sometimes I even wonder if it happened at all. I think it did, Molly. Please, go on. How long were you there? I asked. 3 days? I was in and out the whole time. Then at some point I woke up again and I was just back home, in my bed. There was a note from Rod trying to apologize and all of his things were gone. She took a long, deep breath and looked over at me for the first time since she'd started her story. She was still shaking, but not as much as before. That was it. A week later, I called a lawyer and filed for divorce. Rod didn't contest it. And you never pressed charges? I asked. I never told anyone about this, she said. Not a soul. I know how that must sound, but I don't know. After losing Zach and everything else that happened, I just couldn't stand to look back anymore. Like I'd go crazy if I thought about it too much. All I wanted was to move on. She smiled again, sadly, down into her lap. You must think I'm pretty pathetic. No, I said. I reached over and took her hand, fighting back my own tears. Just the opposite. I think you might be a hero. Chapter 87. On the way back to D.C., I got Bob Shaw, the captain of MPD's homicide unit, on the phone and started lining up an immediate mobile surveillance team on Rodney Glass. This detail needed to be as covert as possible. That meant pulling cars out of the pool that weren't Crown Vics or Impalas, things that didn't scream undercover cop to the informed eye. I also gave Shaw a list of names from narcotics and a few of the warrant squads, guys I knew had the look and skills to go unnoticed on the street. What I didn't want was anyone who had been anywhere near the Braniff campus since this investigation had started. That included myself. Glass knew me. I was going to have to stay on the fringes of this surveillance for the time being. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, I was back in the city, and we had 3 cars positioned strategically around the school neighborhood, just as Glass was leaving for the day. All of my team were carrying GPS locators so I could use a single laptop to track them from a distance in my own car. We had radio communication set up on an alternate non-recorded channel, which was as private as we were going to get on short notice. I parked several blocks away and listened in. This is Tango. He's out the south gate. Green Subaru Forester, turning north on Wisconsin. Go ahead, Tango. This is X-Ray. I'll cut around and get you somewhere after 37th Street. No problem. Bravo, hang back if you can. Copy that. We had just enough units to run a floating box, with one car following for a while, then dropping off while another one came in to take its place. I gave them some time to get ahead of me, then pulled around and brought up the rear from about a half a mile back. Who's got eyes on him? I asked, once I was headed up Wisconsin the way they'd gone. What's he doing? Well, this is Bravo. He's just driving, listening to music, it looks like, tapping his hands on the wheel. Guy doesn't seem like he's got a care in the world. Yeah, well, I think maybe he does. Glass stayed on Wisconsin for a couple of miles. It seemed like he might be headed into Maryland, but then I got word he was stopping in the Friendship Heights shopping mall. He parked in the lot outside Bloomingdale's and walked over to the Mazza Gallery Mall. I sent 2 guys inside after him and kept one circling the block, then parked myself just past the lot where I could see Glass's empty car. For the next 45 minutes, it was the usual kind of boring minutiae you get on 99% of surveillance details. I sat and listened while Glass went to McDonald's, got a burger, sat at one of the tables reading a paperback copy of Sebastian Junger's War, which I'd read myself. He didn't seem to be in any kind of hurry, nothing special about the day. When he finally got up again, they followed him into Neiman Marcus, leapfrogging around the store while he looked at shoes and men's shirts. It almost seemed like he was deliberately killing time for some reason. And then suddenly, he was gone. Tango, you got him? I heard. Negative. Hang on a second. Hold on. I think he went into the bathroom. Another 15 seconds ticked by. Come on, come on, come on. What's going on there? I said. This is Tango. It's not him in the bathroom. I think we might have lost him. Lost him? I said, trying not to rip anyone's head off, yet. Or he gave you the slip. I really don't know, he said, but we're going to want some more eyes in here. I resisted the urge to run inside myself. I didn't want to lose my head and blow this thing, but I sure as hell didn't want to lose Rodney Glass either. Chapter 88. This was pure misery, a disaster, and I'd been in charge. I was so angry at myself, even if I couldn't have done anything differently now. I was going crazy, watching Glass's Subaru from the confines of my own car and listening to nothing but radio silence while my guys scoured the neighborhood. Both malls, the parking lots, side streets. Then, just after 7 o'clock, I spotted Glass. He came sauntering around the corner from the front of the mall and cut diagonally across the parking lot. That son of a bitch. I got him, I radioed. He's headed back to his car. Get out here and get yourselves ready to go. It was dark by now, but the parking lot was well lit. I used a small pair of binoculars to try and see what Glass was carrying. He'd been empty-handed on his way in. The shopping bag he had in one hand was from Anthropology, I saw, the kind of place where my kids might shop, or the president's kids, for that matter. Nothing in there for someone like him. He was a tall, strapping guy, a grown-up, for starters. He favored LL Bean and Carhartt as far as I could tell, not the trendy fashions of this place. What was that about? In his other hand, he had a tall cup with a straw sticking out the top. The logo on the side said AMC. That meant the movie theater, not the food court. Jesus, had I been tearing out my hair for 3 hours while Rodney Glass had taken himself to a matinee? Or was that just what he wanted us to think? Was this all for show? Where else might he have been all this time? As I watched him throw his bag into the back of the car, casually, maybe too casually, I started to get a horrible sinking feeling. It was nothing I could prove to myself either way, but my gut was starting to tell me what my head didn't want to know. He knew he was being watched, didn't he? He knew.
Book 5. Rush to the Finish. Chapter 89. Hala kept her head down, her face averted as she walked up First Street. She crossed K Street and then cut left into a narrow alley near the bus station. It was well screened at the front by several large gray dumpsters with stacks of wooden pallets, abandoned furniture, and old bags of garbage at the back where Tariq was waiting for her. He was even paler than when she'd left him. It looked like he'd lost a good deal of blood. Tariq was becoming a liability. "Did you get it?" he asked. "Some of it," Hala answered, and knelt down where he was, sitting propped up against the brick wall. From inside her shirt she pulled out a small bottle of Tylenol, a roll of gauze, and an ace bandage. It was as much as she'd been able to lift at the drugstore without being seen. "Let me see your hand," she said. "Please, let me see." She pulled away the strip of shirt cloth she'd used to wrap Tariq's wound the night before. It was in horrendous shape. The bullet had passed right through, probably shattering the metacarpal of his right thumb as it did. He had no flexion, no extension at all. If they didn't get proper medical attention, and soon, she was going to have to start cutting away the dead and dying flesh. That part she kept to herself. He moaned as she rewrapped it, using the gauze first, then the ace bandage. Pressure was the only tool she had at her disposal for now, but she could see the agony it put him in. When she held out several of the Tylenol, he shook his head. "Hala, please," he said. "It's not enough. You know what I want." She did. That's exactly why she'd taken the cyanide from him. Both of their capsules were now in her pocket, where she intended them to stay. The only other thing they had left to their name was Hala's Sig Sauer pistol. Everything else, their passports, money, computer, all of it, was back at the Four Seasons. It might as well have been locked in a vault. Even on her quick trip to the drugstore and back, Hala had seen her own grainy image gracing the cover of several newspapers. They didn't even have the means to get themselves out of Washington. This god-forsaken city had become their prison, and Tariq knew it. The empty, defeated look in his eyes said everything she needed to know. "Please, Hala," he tried again. "There is no dishonor in this. We've done all we can." She pressed the Tylenol into his hand. "Take them," she said. "Trust me, my love. We're not done yet. Not even close." There was still one possibility she could think of. It was a risk, but less extreme than the option at the bottom of her pocket. When she got up to leave again, Tariq reached after her like a child who couldn't bear to be left alone. "Where are you going?" he moaned. "Not far," she said. "Just wait here. I'll be back for you. I promise." Chapter 90. Hala left Tariq at the back of the alley and crossed the street to the bus station. There was every reason to feel terrified right now, but she wasn't. The more Tariq seemed to be giving up, the more determined she became. Their backs were against the wall, and so what? They'd been